Admiral Park's gaze swept across the vast expanse of space visible through the reinforced viewport. Stars glittered against the darkness, cold and distant witnesses to humanity's long exile. The massive form of her flagship, the UES Vengeance, dominated the view, its hull gleaming under the light of Proxima Centauri. 3,000 years had passed since Earth's destruction. 3,000 years of rebuilding, planning, and remembering. "Admiral, the Council awaits," said Lieutenant Kim, approaching with measured steps. Her uniform bore the insignia of the United Human Forces, a phoenix rising from stylized flames. Park nodded, straightening her formal jacket. "Are all representatives present?" "Yes, Admiral. Even the delegates from the outer colonies arrived an hour ago." The walk to the council chamber took them through Proxima Station's central hub. Civilians and military personnel alike paused to watch Admiral Park pass. Some offered respectful nods, others simply stared. Everyone knew what this day meant. The circular council chamber fell silent as Park entered. 20 representatives sat around a large table, each bearing the distinct markers of their colony worlds. Some showed the adaptations of generations spent under different gravities or atmospheres, subtle differences that underscored how far humanity had evolved during its diaspora. "Thank you all for coming," Park began, her voice carrying easily in the perfect acoustics of the room. "Today marks the beginning of what our ancestors have prepared for since the fall of Earth." She activated the central display unit. A three-dimensional map of known space materialized above the table. Blue points of light represented human settlements, scattered but numerous. Red marked the vast territory of the Voidborn Empire. "For generations, we've hidden our true numbers and technology," Park continued. "We've built our strength while the Voidborn believed humans were nothing more than an extinct species from a forgotten world." Representative Moon from the mining colonies of Tau Ceti leaned forward. "Many of us have prospered in our new homes, Admiral. Why risk everything for a world none of us have ever seen?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Park had expected this. 3 millennia was a long time, even for a people who passed down their history as religiously as humans had. "Computer, display historical file Earth Final Day," Park commanded. The map disappeared, replaced by footage that made several council members gasp. The recording, preserved through countless generations, showed Earth from orbit. The blue-green planet seemed peaceful for a moment before void-borne weapons fire began to streak across its surface. Continents cracked. Oceans boiled. Within minutes, humanity's homeworld fractured like glass. "This isn't about vengeance for a planet none of us walked upon," Park said softly. "This is about justice." Since Earth's destruction, the Voidborn have obliterated 17 other civilizations. Unless stopped, they will continue their campaign of extermination against any species they deem unworthy of the stars. Park zoomed the display to show a small solar system near the edge of Voidborn space. "Our intelligence suggests they're planning to cleanse this system next. The inhabitants have just achieved spaceflight." Representative Kohn from the agricultural worlds shook his head. "We number billions now, across dozens of worlds, but the Voidborn control thousands of systems. Their military might exceeds ours by every measure." "Not every measure," Park countered. She triggered another file, showing the prototype weapons their scientists had developed. "We have technology they cannot imagine. We have determination they cannot understand. And we have something they have never faced, an enemy they believe they already destroyed." The chamber grew quiet as Park walked slowly around the table. 3,000 years ago, a handful of human ships escaped Earth's destruction. Our ancestors vowed that humanity would return. Not just to avenge our homeworld, but to ensure no other species suffers our fate. Park looked at each representative in turn. "That day has come." Representative Lee from the inner colony stood. "The Vengeance carries our most advanced weapons systems. What are your immediate plans, Admiral?" "Operation Shadow begins tonight," Park replied. "A small team will infiltrate a Voidborn outpost to gather current intelligence on their defenses and communications. Within 30 days, we'll launch our first strike against their forces." The debate continued for hours, voices rising and falling as humanity's leaders confronted the reality of what they were about to undertake. Some argued for caution, others for immediate action. As the session concluded, Park stood alone at the viewport again, watching her flagship's running lights pulse steadily against the darkness. Lieutenant Kim approached quietly. "The Council has approved the operation, Admiral. Commander Choi's team is preparing for deployment." Park nodded. "After 3,000 years, Lieutenant, humanity returns to the galactic stage. The Voidborn are about to learn that some flames cannot be extinguished, they only wait to burn brighter." Commander Choi checked his tactical display one last time as the stealth shuttle approached the Voidborn outpost. The small moon-sized station hung in orbit around a gas giant, its curved metallic surface reflecting the planet's swirling storms below. 6 elite operatives sat in silence around him, each focused on their own pre-mission rituals. 5 minutes to insertion point, announced the pilot, her voice steady despite the danger. Choi looked at his team. Technician Song adjusted her data extraction tools with nimble fingers. Sergeant Bei checked his plasma rifle for the 3rd time. The others, Jin, Hyun, and Lee, maintained the practiced calm of veterans. "Remember," Choi said, "this is intelligence gathering only. We get in, extract the data, and leave without detection. The future of humanity depends on what we learn today." The shuttle's stealth systems had been perfected over centuries, incorporating technology that bent light and absorbed energy signatures. It approached the outpost's maintenance airlock, a rarely used entry point identified by drone surveillance weeks earlier. With a gentle bump, they docked. No alarms sounded. The Voidborn remained unaware of the humans who now prepared to breach their sanctuary. Hyun operated the airlock bypass, his specialized tools interfacing with the alien technology. After 10 seconds, the outer door slid open. The team moved inside in practiced formation, their adaptive camouflage suits adjusting to match the metallic corridors of the outpost. "Life signs?" Choi whispered into his calm. "Minimal activity in this sector," Jean replied, monitoring her scanner. "Most Voidborn are gathered in the central command hub, as expected. They move through service tunnels rarely used by the station's occupants. The air smelled strange, a mix of sulfur compounds and artificial environmental agents suited to Voidborn biology. Their helmets filtered the atmosphere, but the alien nature of their surroundings remained impossible to ignore. After 20 minutes of careful navigation, they reached their target, a secondary data processing node connected to the outpost's main network. "This is it," Technician Song whispered, removing a specialized interface device from her pack. "Cover me. This will take at least 10 minutes." The others formed a protective perimeter while Song worked. She plugged her device into the alien system, bridging incompatible technologies with the adapter humanity had spent decades developing. "First firewall bypassed," she reported. "Beginning data extraction." Choi kept his eyes on the tunnel junction ahead. The mission was proceeding perfectly, almost too perfectly. Years of training had taught him to be wary when things went according to plan. "I'm accessing their military deployment records," Song reported. "Fleet movements, weapon specifications, communication protocols, it's all here." Then her voice changed. "Commander, I'm finding something else. Historical records. Military campaigns." She paused. "These are extinction records. Catalogued species the Voidborn have eliminated." "How many?" Choi asked, not taking his eyes from the corridor. 17 complete extinctions since Earth. They call it purification. There's a schedule, they're planning more." The implications hit Choi like a physical blow. The Voidborn weren't just conquerors, they were systematic exterminators of species they deemed unworthy. "Download everything," he ordered. A sudden shift in air pressure made him tense. "Jean, check the environmental controls." Jean scanned their surroundings. "They're changing the atmospheric composition in this sector. This isn't scheduled maintenance. They know something's wrong." "How much longer?" Choi asked Song. 3 minutes minimum." "We may not have 3 minutes." he gestured to Bei and Lee. Set defensive positions. Through his tactical visor, Choi watched as red dots appeared on his proximity display, voidborne security forces moving toward their position from multiple directions. They haven't pinpointed us yet, Jean reported. They're sweeping the entire sector. The seconds stretched painfully. Song worked furiously at her console while the others readied weapons they hoped not to use. Done. Song finally announced, disconnecting her device. I've got everything. Move out, Choi ordered. Alternative Route 3. They barely made it 20 meters before the first alarm sounded. The harsh, alien wail echoed through the corridors as emergency bulkheads began to close. Run! Choi shouted, abandoning stealth. They sprinted through narrowing gaps as the station locked down around them. Ahead, a patrol of 4 voidborne soldiers appeared, their scaled bodies encased in combat armor. Hyun and Bei fired first, silent, concentrated energy pulses that dropped 2 enemies instantly. The others returned fire, filling the corridor with searing plasma bolts. Lee took a hit to the shoulder, the plasma burning through his armor. Jean pulled him along as they changed direction, taking a maintenance shaft downward. The shuttle is 3 levels down, Choi reminded them, helping Jean with the injured Lee. Another patrol intercepted them at a junction. In the chaotic exchange of fire, Hyun fell, his body crumpling as multiple plasma bolts found their mark. Leave me, Lee insisted as his wound slowed the group. The data matters more than any of us. Choi hesitated. Every instinct told him to save his entire team, but the mission's success outweighed personal loyalty. Bei, get Lee to the shuttle with Song and the data. Jean and I will create a diversion. Bei nodded grimly, taking Lee's weight from Jean. They separated at the next junction. Choi and Jean led the voidborne security teams on a chase through the station's lower levels, drawing them away from their escaping comrades. When they finally fought their way back to the airlock, only Choi made it aboard the shuttle. As they detached from the station, plasma fire scorching their hull, Choi looked at the 3 survivors and the precious data they'd obtained. The cost had been high, but humanity now knew the truth about their ancient enemy. Set course for Proxima Station, he told the pilot, his voice hollow with loss. Admiral Park needs to see this immediately. Admiral Park entered the secure laboratory deep within Proxima Station's research sector. The guards at the entrance verified her identity with retinal and DNA scans before the massive doors slid open. The lab beyond was unlike any other facility in human space. A place where the most brilliant minds worked on technology that bordered on the impossible. Dr. Lee greeted her with a respectful nod. His eyes showed the fatigue of someone who hadn't properly slept in days. Admiral, thank you for coming personally. What we're about to show you couldn't be transmitted, even on secured channels. Commander Choi's team paid a heavy price for the intelligence they gathered, Park replied. If your project can give us an edge against the Voidborn, their sacrifice won't be in vain. Dr. Lee led her through the main laboratory where dozens of scientists worked at various stations. They passed through another security checkpoint into a circular chamber with a reinforced observation area at one end. We call it Prometheus, Dr. Lee said, gesturing toward the center of the room. At first, Park wasn't sure what she was looking at. A containment field shimmered around what appeared to be a small sphere of pure energy, a swirling mass of blue-white light that seemed to pulse with its own rhythm. The sphere wasn't perfectly stable, occasionally it would flare brightly or momentarily dim. What am I looking at, Doctor? Something that shouldn't exist, according to conventional physics. Dr. Lee's voice carried a mixture of pride and concern. Prometheus is based on theoretical work from old Earth research into the fundamental nature of reality that was never fully developed before the destruction. He activated a control panel, and a holographic display appeared, showing complex equations and diagrams. Simply put, Prometheus doesn't just manipulate energy or matter. It manipulates the underlying fabric of spacetime itself. Admiral Park studied the glowing sphere with renewed interest. And as a weapon? Its potential is concerning. Dr. Lee gestured to another scientist who activated a simulation on a nearby screen. It showed a small drone deploying a miniature version of the Prometheus device near an asteroid. When activated, the space around the energy sphere seemed to bend inward before the asteroid simply ceased to exist. Not exploded, not shattered, just gone, leaving only a faint ripple in the surrounding space. The demonstration is scheduled for tomorrow at the abandoned mining facility in the Theta system, Dr. Lee continued. But before we proceed, there are ethical considerations we needed to discuss. Colonel Yoon stepped forward from where he had been observing silently. Admiral, this technology crosses a line. The Prometheus doesn't just destroy, it effectively erases its target from reality. If we deploy this against the Voidborn, we risk becoming exactly what we've spent 3 millennia fighting against. Park considered his words carefully. Show me the simulations of containment failure. Dr. Lee looked uncomfortable but complied. The new simulation showed a cascading effect. A Prometheus device unleashing uncontrolled spacetime distortions that expanded exponentially, consuming everything in their path. The risks are substantial, Dr. Lee admitted. We believe we've solved the containment issues, but if we're wrong. That night, after leaving the laboratory, Admiral Park returned to her quarters. She removed a small, worn metal case from a hidden compartment in her desk. Inside was her grandfather's medal, one of the few physical objects that had survived Earth's destruction. The tarnished metal caught the light as she turned it in her fingers. She remembered the stories passed down through generations. Her grandfather had been a junior officer on one of the escaped ships. He had watched Earth die from the bridge viewscreen, holding this same medal in his trembling hands. Before his death many years later, he had made young Park promise to never forget, but also to never let vengeance consume her humanity. What would you do? She whispered to the medal, as if her ancestor might somehow answer across the centuries. The next day, Park stood in the observation bay of the UES Vengeance, watching as a small unmanned ship deployed the Prometheus device near the abandoned Voidborn mining facility. The structure was massive, a hollowed-out asteroid once used to process rare minerals before being abandoned decades ago when the resources were depleted. Deployment complete, reported the weapons officer. Device is stable and awaiting activation command. Park exchanged glances with Colonel Yoon, who stood beside her. His expression remained troubled. If we use this technology, there's no going back, Yoon said quietly. We will have crossed a line our ancestors might not have wanted us to cross. Park thought of the data Commander Choi had brought back, records of 17 civilizations systematically exterminated by the Voidborn, with more planned for purification. She thought of Earth, of her grandfather's medal, and of the responsibility she carried. Sometimes the line was crossed long before we arrived, she replied. Activate Prometheus. The Prometheus device flared brightly on the viewscreen. For a brief moment, the space around the mining facility seemed to bend inward, light itself warping around the distortion. Then, in absolute silence, the massive asteroid structure simply vanished. No explosion, no debris field, just empty space where a kilometer-wide installation had existed moments before. The bridge crew stared in stunned silence. Even those who had seen the simulations were unprepared for the reality of what they had just witnessed. Record everything, Park ordered. Full sensor analysis. We need to understand exactly what happened. As the crew jumped to follow her orders, Park caught Colonel Yoon's troubled gaze. I understand your concerns, Colonel. But remember what we're fighting for: not just vengeance, but the survival of countless species who will suffer Earth's fate if the Voidborn continue unchallenged. Yoon nodded slowly. Let's just make sure we recognize ourselves when this war is over, Admiral. Park turned back to the viewscreen, where stars shone in the void where the mining facility had been. Prometheus worked, perhaps too well. Now humanity had a weapon that might finally balance the scales against their ancient enemy. The question that remained was what using such power would cost them. The Voidborn Emperor Nak slammed his clawed hand against the tactical display, sending ripples across the holographic star map. The red indicators showing unexplained incidents at the Empire's borders had multiplied over the past month. Impossible, he hissed, his scaled skin darkening with anger. Your explanation, High Commander? High Commander Tech bowed low, the ceremonial blades on his armor clinking softly. The incidents appear coordinated, Great One. A mining facility in the Theta sector vanished completely. Outpost 7 was infiltrated. 3 patrol vessels disappeared near the Crimson Nebula. The Emperor's inner eyelids flickered, a sign of deep agitation. And the perpetrators? The evidence suggests. Tech hesitated, knowing how his next words would be received. Humans, Great One. A chorus of derisive clicks and hisses erupted from the assembled advisors. The Emperor silenced them with a gesture. Humans are extinct, stated the Imperial historian, her voice dry with certainty. We cleansed their homeworld 3,000 cycles ago. The few survivors scattered and died off centuries ago. Then someone is using their name, the Emperor replied. Or impersonating their technology signatures. Regardless, this incursion must be addressed. He turned back to the High Commander. Send Ambassador Rowe to investigate. If these are truly humans, I want to know how they survived and what their capabilities are. Far away, aboard the UES Vengeance, Admiral Park reviewed the final preparations for the upcoming meeting. The neutral station is secure, she asked her security chief. Yes, Admiral. Our teams have swept it 3 times. The Voidborn will be allowed a delegation of 5, unarmed, as agreed. Park nodded. This meeting wasn't part of her original plan, but the Voidborn had requested diplomatic contact after the series of strikes against their outposts. She had decided to grant it, not out of any hope for peace, but for the psychological impact of revealing humanity's return. They expect to find pretenders, she said. Let's show them how wrong they are. 2 days later, Park's shuttle docked at Neutral Station Alpha, a small facility established in unclaimed space. Her team included 2 senior officers and 2 security personnel, the minimum she could bring while maintaining safety. The Voidborn shuttle arrived precisely on schedule. Park watched through the station's cameras as Ambassador Rowe emerged, followed by his aides. Even through the video feed, the alien's arrogance was palpable in his bearing. The ambassador stood nearly 2 meters tall, his iridescent scales shifting from green to blue under the station lights. The ceremonial robes he wore marked him as a high-ranking member of the Imperial Court. Park met the delegation in the station's conference room, a sparse chamber with a simple table and chairs designed to accommodate various physiologies. When Ambassador Rowe entered, he paused momentarily at the sight of the humans, his inner eyelids flickering rapidly. Park recognized it as a sign of surprise, though she doubted most humans would notice the subtle tell. I am Ambassador Rowe of the glorious Voidborn Empire, he announced, his translator rendering his clicking speech into standard language. I come at the Emperor's bidding to address those responsible for recent acts of aggression against Imperial territories. Park kept her expression neutral. I am Admiral Park of the United Human Forces. I represent the combined governments of humanity. The ambassador's scales rippled, a sign of disbelief or possibly amusement. Humanity is extinct. Whoever you are, your charade is both futile and dangerous. Park activated a data tablet and slid it across the table. These are historical records from old Earth. Specifically, they show the unprovoked Voidborn attack that destroyed our homeworld. We've preserved these records for 3,000 years. The ambassador glanced at the tablet dismissively. A fabrication. The species known as humans was deemed unworthy of the stars. Their elimination was authorized by the Emperor himself. None survived. Clearly, Park said, gesturing to herself and her team, that assessment was incorrect. The ambassador's aide whispered something in their native language. Rowe's posture stiffened. Our analysis confirms you are indeed genetically human, he admitted. An oversight in our extermination protocols that will soon be corrected. If you surrender now and reveal the location of your remaining populations, the Emperor might grant you a swift end. Park leaned forward slightly. Let me be perfectly clear, Ambassador. Humanity didn't come here to surrender. We came to deliver a message. She activated a holographic display showing the successful Prometheus test. This was an abandoned Voidborn mining facility. As you can see, it no longer exists. The Voidborn delegation watched the recording in silence. When it ended, the ambassador's scales had darkened considerably. You have developed prohibited technologies, he said, voice lower than before. We've developed the means to ensure justice, Park corrected him. For 3,000 years, we rebuilt, remembering what you took from us. During that time, you've destroyed 17 other civilizations. We've come to ensure you never destroy another. The ambassador rose abruptly. This meeting is over. The Emperor will be informed of your threats. The full might of the Voidborn Empire will descend upon whatever pitiful colonies you've established. As the Voidborn delegation departed, Park's second officer leaned closer. Do you think they'll be able to locate our worlds? They'll try, Park replied. But first, they'll report what they've seen, that humanity has returned, and we have technology they've never encountered. She watched the Voidborn shuttle undock. The psychological impact alone will be worth it. For 3 millennia, they've believed us extinct. Now, for the first time since Earth fell, the Voidborn know fear. The Starlight Confederation ships materialized at the edge of the neutral system, their crystalline hulls catching and refracting the light of the distant sun. Admiral Park watched their approach from the bridge of the UES Vengeance. After 3 weeks of careful diplomatic overtures, the reclusive species had finally agreed to a meeting. They're beautiful, Lieutenant Kim remarked, watching the alien vessels glide toward the rendezvous point. Park nodded. And they've suffered under Voidborn rule for over 5 centuries. Their outer worlds were stripped of resources, their population centers reduced to labor camps. The Starlight people were one of the few species to survive a Voidborn purification campaign, though at terrible cost. Their main worlds had been conquered rather than destroyed, deemed useful for their unique mineral deposits and skilled workforce. Receiving transmission from the lead vessel, announced the communications officer. They're requesting permission to send a shuttle with Coordinator Han and 3 advisors. Permission granted, Park replied. Prepare the conference room and honor guard. An hour later, Park stood in the Vengeance's formal reception area as the Starlight delegation entered. Coordinator Han moved with a fluid grace, her luminescent skin giving off a soft blue glow. Like all her species, she stood taller than the average human, with delicate features and eyes that reflected light like multifaceted gems. Admiral Park, Han spoke through a translator device at her throat. I admit I was skeptical when your emissaries claimed to represent humanity. Your kind is known to us only through ancient records and Voidborn propaganda. Park bowed respectfully. We've existed in hiding for a long time, Coordinator. Rebuilding our strength and watching as the Voidborn continued their campaign of extermination across the galaxy. They moved to the conference room, where holographic displays showed star maps and military assessments. Park outlined humanity's proposal, a formal alliance against their common enemy, combining human technology with Starlight knowledge of Voidborn territories and defenses. Coordinator Han listened silently, her expression unreadable to human eyes. When Park finished, the Starlight leader rose and walked to the viewport, gazing out at the stars. Admiral, my people have endured Voidborn occupation for generations, she said finally. We've tried rebellion before. Each attempt ended with entire cities being vaporized as punishment. Why should we risk what little freedom we've managed to preserve? Park joined her at the viewport. Because this time, you won't fight alone. We've developed weapons that can match Voidborn power. Together, we can. The ship's alarm cut her off mid-sentence. Red emergency lights flashed throughout the room. Admiral to bridge. Report. Park barked into her communicator. Multiple Voidborn warships just dropped out of hyperspace, came the urgent reply. They're launching fighters and powering weapons. They must have tracked the Starlight vessels. Coordinator Han's advisors moved protectively around their leader. You led them to us, one accused. This meeting was a trap. No, Park said firmly. But it doesn't matter now. We need to evacuate your delegation back to your ships immediately. The deck shuddered as the first Voidborn energy weapons struck the Vengeance's shields. Park guided the Starlight delegation toward the shuttle bay, issuing orders as they moved through the corridors. Launch all fighters. Bring the Prometheus device to standby status. and signaled the UES defender to move to intercept the largest void-borne vessel. When they reached the shuttle bay, Coordinator Han hesitated before boarding. "Your ship is outgunned, Admiral. Why not retreat?" Park's expression hardened. "Because humans don't run from the voidborn. Not anymore." She pulled a data crystal from her pocket and pressed it into Han's hand. "These are the specifications for our shield technology. It can protect your civilian populations from orbital bombardment. Use it, whether you join us or not." Another blast rocked the ship. Through the bay windows, they could see the space battle unfolding, human fighters engaging voidborne craft in a deadly dance against the backdrop of stars. "You should go," Park urged. Han studied Park for a long moment, then handed the crystal to an advisor. "Take this to our ship." She turned back to Park. "I will stay. If you fight the voidborn today, you do not do so alone." Park nodded sharply. "Lieutenant, get the coordinator to the Auxiliary Command Center. I need to get to the bridge." The battle raged for hours. The voidborne fleet, though surprised by the effectiveness of human weapons, had numbers on their side. The UES defender moved to protect the retreating Starlight vessels, taking the brunt of a concentrated voidborne attack. The defender's captain deliberately overloaded his engines rather than let the ship be captured, taking 3 voidborne cruisers with him in a blinding explosion. From the bridge, Park and Han watched the tactical display as the remaining human ships formed a defensive line, allowing the last civilian vessels to escape. "Your people fight with remarkable courage," Han observed. "Even knowing they are outnumbered." "It's not about the numbers," Park replied, ordering another squadron into position. "It's about showing the voidborn and everyone else that humanity has returned, and we will never surrender again." When the battle finally ended, the voidborn had retreated, but at great cost to the human fleet. Park stood in her private quarters, studying the casualty reports with a heavy heart. A soft chime announced Han's arrival. "Admiral," the Starlight coordinator said, her voice solemn. "Today my people witnessed something we thought impossible: voidborne ships in retreat." Park looked up from the reports. "We bloodied their nose, but lost many good people doing it." "My council has voted," Han continued. "The Starlight Confederation will join your alliance. We will provide star charts, intelligence, and fighters. In return, we ask for your protection and technology." Park extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement. After a moment's hesitation, Han clasped it with her long, luminescent fingers. "Together then," Park said. "For Earth, for your worlds, and for all the species who deserve a future free from fear." Later, alone in her quarters, Park activated a holographic map of voidborne space. She marked their first major target, a shipyard in a system near the Empire's core. The war to avenge Earth had moved beyond symbolic strikes. Now, with allies at their side, humanity would take the fight directly to their ancient enemy. The real battle had only just begun.